Yeah, I'll do that. The way it'll work is that you'll have your lecture first, and I hope you don't take the time to look off to the side, study for the bonus quiz again. You know, you either have it or you don't. And after the lecture, I'll activate the bonus quiz, and I'll cut everybody off of ConferZoom. You won't have to do it. I'll just uh, push the magic button, and you're all gone. And you have then to go to the modules. I'll remind you while you're in Canvas. Go to the module, go to the end of the last module, which is now number 7, and you'll see EC models. That stands for extra credit models. It's a 5-minute quiz, as you were expecting, I hope. And if you don't get there in a minute or two, no problem, it doesn't matter. I'm going to give you about a 30-minute break here, okay? So you'll, during that 30 minutes, have to complete the 5-minute test. You're timed, so you're cut off as soon as you finished up using your 5 minutes. And then I want you to come back by going to ConferZoom again. There'll be a new time slot entered in there so that you can enter in, well, I don't know the exact time right now, but you'll see it then. And we can do the laboratory for today. Okay. Questions? Okay. And we'll go to it. Okay, are you with me down here at week 7?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you. We're going to finish the 3 lectures on digestive system. 2 were up here. Okay, it was continued from the week before. You can barely see it at the top there. The 3rd lecture is called the cross section of the GI tract. Okay, cross section of the GI tract. Well, there's your cross section in a diagrammatic fashion. In the center is the lumen. In the center is the lumen where anything passing through the GI tract has to travel. It's a long tube of about 26 feet in the intestines alone and 35 feet altogether. The lumen is sort of corrugated, as you can see here. It has finger-like extensions moving inward, which increases the surface area greatly for absorption of nutrients from the lumen. We have layers. The innermost layer here that has those extensions is called the tunica mucosa. In this diagram, it's simply called mucosa, but it is the tunica mucosa. It's surrounded by a layer of connective tissue, mostly fat and areolar connective tissue. I realize you don't know what a areolar is yet, but it's fibrous. Excuse me. And then you have a layer or ring of muscle. And then you have a further ring of connective tissue that interconnects this part of the GI tract with another part of the GI tract. If this were, for instance, small intestine that we're looking at here, and it is what we're going to use for our example, The small intestine doesn't just lie loose in the abdominal cavity. It's interconnected with other bands of the small intestine and also to the body wall. So it's held in place pretty darn well. We'll rename in a moment all of these layers. I know I didn't do them all for you yet, okay? But we'll start with the tunica mucosa, the innermost layer. Mucosa is a word you hear a lot and don't know the meaning of. There's a lot of words we use we don't know the meaning of. We think we do, but we don't really. Mucosa is a lining. That's all there is to it. It's a lining. It's the innermost layer. It's called the tunica mucosa, and it surrounds the lumen. It's the only layer of the 4 layers and colors here that touches the lumen. So it's the only layer that can absorb. I want you to envision this as a cross section of the small intestine right now. Okay. The tunica mucosa is the only layer of the 4 layers that has 3 subsets, 3 sub divisions. It has 3 substructures that are important. There we go. The first of the substructures is the epithelial layer. Epithelial means covering or lining. We talked about that once before under tissues. So the epithelial layer is the layer that is really going to touch the lumen of the small intestine in this case. The cells that make up this are of a simple columnar shape. What does that mean? Simple means one layer. Columnar means column shape. We'll see it in a moment, okay? And you'll be very familiar with it before I ever test you on it. I realize you don't understand it fully just yet. An epithelial layer consists of simple columnar cells. These cells are called microvilli, and they cover the extensions into the lumen, these little bumps here, which are called villi. Villi. You're going to hear the term villi a lot. They do the absorption. Villi are only found in the small intestine. There are no villi anywhere else in the GI tract.
Charlie.
Yes,
So the microvilli, they cover the little finger-like extensions.
exactly.
Okay.
And this model is meant to help you with that.
Oh, okay.
These are finger-like extensions in this model, okay, extending into the lumen. The model itself, from top to bottom, is the tunica mucosa. Okay, these are villi, 1, 2, 3. And the outermost layer of cells, the epithelial layer, these cells are also called microvilli, or a singular microvillus. Now, I take exception with this model. You'll notice that some of these cells look squarish. Okay, do any look elongated? This one does. This one does. This one does. This one does not. This one does not. These cells are all elongated. Because the entire GI tract, except for the upper esophagus, which is under voluntary control if you want to jog your memory from last week. The entire GI tract is lined with an epithelium that is simple columnar all the way through to the colon. Okay? Simple columnar. Anyway, we have an epithelial layer, and we can all accept, I hope, that this fronts onto the villus, which has all the fluid and nutrients that are being digested or have been digested and are going to be absorbed. The next layer of the tunica mucosa, remember there's three substructures. Here's the second one right here. It's called the lamina propria. Lamina propria is a series of capillaries, very small blood vessels. They absorb the nutrients that come across the microvilli from the lumen. And so they take up the nutrients, and they're going to take it to no place else except the liver. Go straight to the liver by the hepatic portal system. We've talked about that once before, but we're really going to hit on it soon. Then underneath, there's another layer down here. Dark red, is it? Is this dark red?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, a little bit more of it up here. This is the tunica muscularis. The tunica, I'm sorry, it is not the tunica muscularis. It is the muscularis mucosa. It's not a tunic in itself. We're looking at one tunic here. We're looking at the tunica mucosa with its three layers of epithelium or microvilli, the lamina propria, and now the muscularis mucosa. This is circular smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, you understand, is not voluntary. Circular means it runs around here, runs completely around, and causes the small intestine to contract to help move the contents forward. So you have three layers here. There's a fourth structure. Might as well label it now. We also have the presence of a lacteal. A lacteal is a slightly larger structure. Definitely has a yellowish color to it, different than the lamina propria. And the lacteal absorbs from the lumen across the microvilli fat. It absorbs lipid, and that's all its function is to take the emulsified lipid that's been emulsified from the bile salts of the liver, brings it in, and also allows it to enter into the hepatic portal system. The hepatic meaning liver, the system that takes the nutrients to the liver. Here's an example of what villi look like. If you can imagine or see in this a tunnel here and going back and going behind, okay, that would be the GI tract. But these are the villi, nice and clean. My God, somebody washed it pretty well. These are the villi. These little fingers increase the surface area of the small intestine tremendously. The length of the small intestine itself increases the surface area tremendously. This repeats what I've already said. The second substructure is the lamina propria, a set of capillaries within each villus absorbs nutrients that the villus collects. All of the millions of lamina propria eventually gather to take absorbed nutrients to the liver by way of the portal vein, or the hepatic portal vein as it's also called. The lacteal takes up the emulsified lipid that's been admitted by the villus. Helping blood in the villus to move along is the muscularis mucosa. It also does help to move the food as well, but it really helps the blood to move the captured nutrients towards the hepatic portal system. The muscularis mucosa is an area of circular smooth muscle. Smooth muscle that's arranged in a circular fashion around the GI tract, squeezing it. The second, third, and fourth membranes. Let me run back to the top. Here's the first, second, third, and fourth. These get finished off very quickly. The second one is the tunica submucosa. Well, the name speaks for itself, we hope. That this is a layer of both dense and loose connective tissue. And its job is to join the tunica mucosa with the muscular layer, the tunica muscular, I'm sorry about that. Let me think about this. Yes, that's true. To join it to the tunica muscularis. Okay, so number 2 is to squeeze in between numbers 1 and 3. 1 we just did, the tunica muscularis. Now we have the tunica submucosa, and the tunica submucosa is a joining layer. It's a connective tissue layer. It connects the tunica mucosa to the layer that comes next. And the layer that comes next is the tunica muscularis. Not to be confused with the muscularis mucosa, as I just did. I know, bad on me. Okay, this is the muscularis mucosa in the tunica mucosa. What we're going to look at next is this layer. And this is out 1, 2 to the third layer. This is the tunica muscularis. It's divided into 2 parts, an inner circular layer of smooth muscle, still smooth muscle, and an outer layer that runs longitudinally towards you so that it can both squeeze the small intestine and also contract it lengthwise so it becomes shorter temporarily. And that really helps move the contents along, whether it's blood or whether it's absorbed nutrients. This layer, the third layer, is the tunica muscularis. You know it's a tunic because I used the word tunica. Okay. And the other one, muscularis mucosa, which is in the tunica muscularis, it doesn't start with capital T. Okay, it's the third layer does. It's tunica muscularis. Smooth muscle primarily responsible for the movement of blood in the intestinal wall. The innermost layer is circular and smooth, while the outermost layer is longitudinal. It's sometimes difficult for people to remember which is which. So for me, it used to be. And so I put together a slogan for myself. It works for me every time. And it's not a funny one. It's not one I'm proud of at all, but it works. You wait a long time on the outside before you get to the inner circle. So longitudinal is outside, and you will have to wait your turn a long time before you get to the inner circular muscle. Inner circular. Use it or get one of your own because you will be asked which is the longitudinal, which is the circular section. The final layer, the fourth layer, is the tunica serosa. This is a layer of tissue that surrounds the intestines and it interconnects parts of the organs. What organs? All the parts of the small intestine are interconnected. They're interconnected to each other. If you were to take a pig, like I've seen in some horror movies, and you'll probably see it too coming up now that Halloween's here, and slice its underside, it won't happen as it does in the movies that all the insides fall out. Can't happen. Can't happen. Why not? Because you have membranes attaching the organs together, and all of these organs attached to the back body wall, the dorsal body wall. So everything is attached. An organ may slip down somewhat, but they're not going to be falling out. We have a lot of membranes inside of the body that keep the organs in place. If we didn't, you go out jogging one time and you're going to come back a hell of a mess inside. Okay? Probably can't put you back together again. The tunica serosa is this outer layer which surrounds the intestines. Okay. It's sometimes called the adventitia, which is another name for it, but that term is primarily used with dissection of fetal pigs and rats and things in high school. I'm giving it to you because you may hear it. There's no role in digestion for the tunica serosa. Its role is in connection or interconnection, as is the role of the serous membranes. A serous membrane is a broad, often expansive covering over the body cavities and over the internal organs. These membranes often secrete fluid to lubricate the organs or viscera. I've listed the major ones here and a few of the minor ones as well that you'll need to know. Okay. These serous membranes, if you think of it, if you were to open a cat or some other animal in your mind, and all of the organs sat loose, we would have a problem. Okay, the cat would have a problem. A person would have a problem if all the organs sat loose. So they're interconnected to each other, almost like using packing tape. Tape around this organ, then the next organ, and then the next, and interconnect everything. And that's what these do. They also line the thoracic and abdominal cavity walls. So the first one of these serous membranes, not serous, serous, the parietal peritoneum. This is the wall that completely covers, this is the membrane that completely covers the wall of the abdominal pelvic cavity. So now, using your imagination again, cut the belly of a cat, a deceased cat, of course, no blood or anything like that, and put your finger on the underside of the body wall, or the inside of the body wall, not the outside, go to the inside. and touch. It's large, and it's covered, and it's going to be slippery because it's covered with a membrane called the parietal peritoneum. This is the membrane that covers the wall of the abdominal pelvic cavity. I do have some pictures for you. We'll get to those later. The visceral peritoneum. This is also located in the abdominal region, but it covers the organs of the abdominal pelvic cavity. It is interconnected with the parietal peritoneum. These two are interconnected. The parietal peritoneum covers the body wall and then extends itself outward to the organs, where it's called the visceral peritoneum, and it covers the rest of the organs. Up in the thoracic cavity, the membrane, the serous membrane that covers the wall of the thoracic cavity, meaning the chamber that holds the lungs and the heart. But you're rubbing your finger inside up against the ribs. And this is the parietal pleura. Parietal pleura. The visceral pleura extends inward from the parietal pleura, and it covers the lungs. This makes for two spaces between the parietal and visceral pleura. The parietal and visceral pleura are interconnected, but there is still a space between them in spots where they are not connected. They're not connected all the way around. The lung sits inside of a pleural cavity. The pleural cavity is covered with visceral pleura. Visceral meaning organ.
Charlie,
Yes,
really quick, the lungs sit in the visceral pleura?
the lungs are covered with visceral pleura. Is that what you asked?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
but not parietal.
Okay,
Parietal pleura only covers the chest wall.
okay.
Okay, so if you open the chest of somebody, you can imagine, as you have seen on TV so many times, reach under the chest wall and touch the ribs from the inside. You move your hand up and down. You've got parietal pleura there. Touch
Thank
the
you.
lung, and you've got visceral pleura.
Okay,
And the two are connected, whether you find that connection or not.
okay.
The parietal pericardium is the membrane around the heart. It's a loose membrane. There's fluid under it for lubricating the movement of the heart. But on the heart surface itself, if I were to take off the parietal pericardium, like peeling a hard-boiled egg, yeah, whether you're thinking of the shell or the skin inside, doesn't make any difference. Then I get to another layer that's right on the heart or right on the egg, and that's the visceral pericardium. This visceral pericardium adheres very tightly to the heart surface, whereas a moment ago I told you that the parietal pericardium is a loose covering. So we have a loose covering around the heart and a tight covering on the heart, and a space between the two that's filled with pericardial fluid, which helps to lubricate the heart. Now, we can say it one way, and it hopefully makes some sense. Then we come to a diagram, and we have to deal with real life, and all of a sudden it gets a tiny bit more complicated. Here's the diaphragm, the separation between the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity. All of these organs, and these are cut pieces of small intestine and large intestine. This could be pancreas. Here's a piece of the stomach. All of these organs in the abdominal pelvic cavity are covered tightly, very tightly, by visceral peritoneum. It interconnects all of them. Some are so major as to get their own special names. Others are just called mesentery. Surrounding the abdominal cavity, though, which is way out here, surrounding the abdominal cavity is the parietal peritoneum. This is the backbone. This is the dorsal body cavity here. And here's where the start of the ventral body cavity is. You see, this piece of serous membrane is not attached to any internal organ. It's only attached to the body wall. Well, where? You have to think in 3 dimensions. I know that's hard, but think of this one attaching laterally towards yourself. Bring it right out to the edge. In this case, would be the left side of the body. Okay. And it's all attached out here. It's attached in the back. It's attached up here. But when it dips in between any of the organs, even though it is still connected, in between the organs, it's called the visceral peritoneum. For the lungs, the parietal peritoneum, in red here, I guess it's red, correct me again if I'm wrong. This is the parietal peritoneum. And this covers the entire thoracic wall. It's also covering down here the upper surface of the diaphragm. And now it's going up here to connect to itself. The blue serous membrane attaches directly to the lung. And that's the visceral pleura. There is a space in white between the parietal and visceral pleura. That houses pleural fluid to lubricate the lungs. And it's called the pleural space. There's an area between the lungs in the thoracic cavity only, where the heart, the trachea, some vessels, and the esophagus all pass through. If you can imagine them all being removed, the space between the lungs is called the mediastinum. Mediastinum. I don't know for how many years I called it mediastinum. And that's because I never heard it pronounced. I just read it, pronounced it the way I thought it should be, and never heard it pronounced, so nobody to counter it. I finally did hear it pronounced, ran over to Google, and put it in there and asked for a pronunciation. It's mediastinum. That's the area right here. Let's see what is in it. One of the things is the heart. The outer layer of the heart that is looser is the parietal pericardium. The serous membrane that is very firmly attached to the heart itself is right here. And that's the visceral pericardium, also known as the epicardium. I don't have the epicardium here, but you'll get it in the third section. For now, visceral pericardium. There's a space, the pericardial space, containing serous fluid between the two, just like we had in the lungs. Here's some additional serous membranes, mostly smaller ones. Some of them are pretty good size, but still smaller than the ones we've just looked at. The falciform ligament of the liver. Here's the liver, almost bisects the liver and adheres it to the anterior body wall and the dorsal body wall. This is the falciform ligament.
It adheres to the anterior and the dorsal
Yes.
body wall. Thank you.
The mesenteries proper. Here, the small intestines have been spread. We have a lot of vessels in here, collecting the nutrients that have been absorbed. And to really sort of cement them in place, this diaphanous or see-through membrane right here, here, all over the place. This is the mesenteries proper. It interconnects the parts of the small intestine. Could I call this visceral peritoneum? Yes, I could, by the definition I gave you just a moment ago. This is visceral peritoneum, but it gets a special, unique name, and it's the mesenteries proper, which are only found interconnecting the parts of the small intestine. In the colon, colon running this way, it needs to maintain its shape as well, and it's interconnected by the mesocolon. There are different parts of the mesocolon, ascending, transverse, and descending, which I will not ask you, and sigmoid. You probably say, well, go ahead and ask us because we know ascending colon, transverse, descending, and sigmoid. But I won't ask you in reference to the serous membranes. All of this is called mesocolon. And if you can see it here at the transverse, it runs underneath the diaphragm and adheres to the dorsal body wall. And it also maintains its integrity or shape and curvature because of the ascending and descending sections of the mesocolon. The greater omentum. I think this was from a German publication, Gaster, on the greater curvature of the stomach, extends this guy here, and it's the greater omentum. It's lousy with fat. It stores fat. It also guards against trauma because of its very presence. The arrow points to the transverse colon. It's just showing here where it's running through this greater omentum. When you first open up a specimen and get to the abdomen, you may find an apron of this greater omentum that you can lift up, and underneath everything looks nice and shiny and the way you'd hoped. But it's kind of disgusting when you first spot it. The greater omentum is also known as the fatty apron. If you have a pencil, you might want to write that down or remember that it's in the recording, the fatty apron. I'll get it in writing to you somewhere. On the other side of the stomach, on the lesser curvature, is the lesser omentum. And this adheres the medial side of the stomach to the liver and to the back body wall. Everything's going to be held in place to the liver and the back body wall. The broad ligament holds the ovary in place. Here's the broad ligament here. Now, it's not here. This is the body wall. The broad ligament is being shown here. It looks like to me a brownish color, and it holds this in place. The suspensory ligament we're not going to cover. The fallopian tube, the ovary, the uterus, and the utero-ovarian ligament we're going to cover under reproductive system. Right now, I just want you to note that we have another serous membrane, in this case, holding the ovary in place. Okay, I'm cruising down to the bottom of week 7. You can't see it yet except by looking at our screen here. EC models, extra credit models. There are 10 questions. You're not asked to name the muscle. You're asked to give its action. It's all multiple choice. So in a moment, not yet, don't rush to do it now. You get yourself confused. Get me confused. Okay, in a moment, I'm going to first activate it. So now you can see it when we do go there. I'm going to come back and I'm going to end the session. I'm going to cut you all off. Okay. That doesn't mean you're out of canvas or anything like that, but you can go immediately to the modules, go to week 7 and start that quiz, which only lasts 5 minutes. Now, if you don't wish to start it right away, that's fine. You can take a breather or restroom break or something, whatever you need to do. Okay. And we're not going to come back. We'll take a nice break today. We'll give you time for that to look at your answers if you wish. We'll come back at 3:30. 3:30. I'm not going to keep you any longer than ever, but come back at 3:30. Now, how do you come back? You go to Conference Zoom again. And although there is not a link to 3:30 there right now, well, while you're taking the test, I'm going to put the link in there. Okay? Questions? Okay, so you have a 5-minute test, a quiz to your benefit ahead of you. And You just need to finish it by 3:30, okay? Because once your 5 minutes are done, it will stop. Okay. No questions? Okay. Goodbye.